Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have some games to discuss. We're going to talk about the Tennessee loss. We're going to talk about the buzzer beater that cost us the game and what NATO's had to say about that game. We will talk about that game and what we learned. We will then break down the Florida game. It's going to be happening on Wednesday evening, which I will be in attendance for. And then we'll get out of here. So as I said, let's talk about the Tennessee game. For anybody that's going to be down in the comments gloating the Alabama lost and I had predicted us to win, yes, it happened. Honestly, I thought the game was happening about like I expected. I thought that for large stretches of this game, Alabama was able to control the tempo, which is something that we have not always seen NATO's teams be able to do against Rick Barnes. I thought in the half court, Alabama actually looked pretty good. The ball was not sticking in the half court. In the first half, there were quite a lot of possessions. We were on pace for almost 80 possessions in this game. It slowed down substantially in the second half, but we still got up to 74 possessions, which is a season high against Tennessee. So, I mean, the game was really playing out as I expected. There were a couple of things I couldn't have foreseen. First thing, I do think Mark Sears was a little sick. That also led to him having some cramps. Mark Sears still had a very good game. He had just 2 turnovers. Alabama had just 12 as a team. My number in turnovers, I thought 14-15 was the number. We stayed well below that number. So I did think that was going to be sufficient to beat Tennessee. And even NATO's talked about it. The team played better than Tennessee for about 39 and a half minutes. And with 30 seconds to go, Alabama was up by 4. And NATO's pulled some of our bigs before the rebound was secured. There was a foul on the rebound. Tennessee hits 4 free throws in a row. Alabama is unable to inbound with just 3 seconds to go, and Tennessee hits a full court or half court buzzer beater to win the game. I'm not going to sit here and say that refs were the difference in this game. If you're looking for that, don't come to me. I think the Alabama did things that they should have not done to win this game. Refs were a factor, of course, but they're a factor in every game. There were some things that went for us, right? Like Mark Sears stepped on Zakai Ziegler's foot. That was not called, right? There were things that went positively for Alabama. There were some things that went negatively for Alabama, right? The foul and the rebound. The fact that Rick Barnes was trying to call timeout as Jemai Mashak's shot went up. There were definitely things on both sides of this, right? I do not think refs were the difference in this game. I thought for it being an on-the-road environment in Knoxville, I thought this was probably one of the better called games that Alabama's had in quite a while. I think that Alabama just fell short in a couple of places. Nato admits that he had a couple of missed coaching errors, right? He doesn't need to make the subs that he did before the rebound is secured, which caused us another foul and 2 more free throws. He needs to call timeout earlier when he realizes that LeBaron Fallon's not going to be able to get the ball in. He thought that LeBaron was going to be able to get the ball in. There's some video of like, hey, did it get the 5 seconds or not? It looks like it was 5. The way the ref was counting, it was a little slower, but it does look like it hit 5 seconds, right? Just straight up, there were a few different things in this game that Nate, admits that he had a bit of coaching malpractice at the end of this game. It happens, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh my gosh, NATO's has to go, anything like that, right? I do think there's some things that have to be cleaned up, right? Inbounding the ball has been an issue for years, honestly, under NATO's. It was something that I hoped was going to be better under Ryan Pannone. It has not been. It's something that, if you think about in the Alabama-North Carolina 4 overtime game, with Brandon Miller, right? Inbounding was a major issue in that game, right? For years, Alabama's had major problems inbounding the basketball. So this is something that I personally think Alabama needs to work on, no matter if this game had happened or not, right? Those specific end-of-game scenarios and just specific scenarios in general, I do not know that Alabama practices as often as they should, right? I have noticed, we talked about some fundamentals. I have noticed some more guys being willing to inbound the ball when it relates to moving quickly, but the specific late game scenarios or, inbound or under basket out of bounds, sideline out of bounds, those things I do think Alabama has to work on. And based on the conversations that you're hearing out of Nate Oates and what he said in the press conference, I do think that's going to happen. I have no reason to suspect that it's not. So I'm going to take that with a positive light. I'm not going to worry too terribly much about it. I do think it needs to be cleaned up before the tournament, but, I feel confident about what I saw in Knoxville. A couple of things also before we get into the player-by-player breakdown. There was something, and I want to pull it up really quick so that I can credit Brian Pasnick with the tweet. He tweeted out on the 2nd, unpopular opinion due to all the emotions from the game. I really like the way we're playing right now, right? And I agree with that statement, right? I agree with the statement that the way Alabama is playing basketball currently actually gives me a lot of hope for what can happen in March, what can happen on Wednesday, what can happen on Saturday, what this team is capable of. I thought that the defense that Alabama played was actually very good against Tennessee. Alabama had 8 steals, 5 of which were from LeBaron Philon. I thought Philon was probably Alabama's best player on both ends of the floor. If you're talking offense and defense, I think Philon was that guy. I thought that Alabama in general played very well. I thought that we left some shots at the free throw line that you just can't miss. The free throws actually ended up basically being the difference in the game. We went 17 of 26, whereas Tennessee went 19 of 26. The big issues in this game were actually the last 7 seconds of each half. Alabama gives up a foul and one to Chris Youngblood fouls on an and one at the end of the first half, and then obviously the game winner 3-pointer to end the game, and that's 6 points in 15 seconds. That if Alabama just isn't lazy and pays attention to what's happening, I think Alabama doesn't give those up, and then Alabama inherently probably wins this game, right? Those are difference makers and specific moments where Alabama can play better than the other team, but all they have to do is execute in a specific finite amount of time and they can win the game, right? And it happened, right? It was really the difference in this game. A few moments led to Alabama losing this game. But I do overall think that Alabama, I feel positively about what I think about this team. I thought the defense was better with switches and better just overall, more like what you saw in that Mississippi State game that I was looking forward to seeing. I thought that Alabama handled Tennessee's physicality actually fairly well. I thought that overall Alabama actually was the team that I wanted them to be. Grant Nelson had 12 rebounds, and he had not been playing particularly well. I thought Jaron Stevenson honestly played pretty well. He got hit with the foul at the end of the game, but Jaron Stevenson hits a 3. Jaron Stevenson gets 3 offensive rebounds to lead the team, right? I thought some of these guys actually played fairly well. Did we miss shots? Sure, but Alabama shot 37.5% from 3. Completely fine, right? We only got 24 off, which is a little less than what we typically would want, but Tennessee does a better job against Alabama actually holding us to less threes. Overall, they don't do a great job, but I think they do a better job against Alabama holding us to threes because they know that's what so much of what Nate Oates wants to do. I thought that Mark Sears playing through the cramps and such, I thought that he was solid in this game. I didn't think that it was something that led me to be concerned. I do think that in the second half, it obviously made a lot more sense for us to have LeBaron Philon running the point instead of Mark. I think Mark playing off ball has been getting him much better looks, much better opportunities. I think that just overall in key scenarios, I think you want the ball in Mark's hands, but I think the offense and the team plays better when the ball is not in his hands. Not to say you can't get him the ball in certain moments in the shot clock and such, but I do think that at times you just need the ball to be in LeBaron's hands or the ball to be in Aiden Holloway's hands. In this game, I thought the ball just needed to be in LeBaron's hands. He was playing absolutely incredibly. Overall, I thought that he was a difference maker in this game. I do think that there were some things, obviously, Alabama could clean up. 12 turnovers is better than what we had been playing. Obviously, you can still clean that up a little bit. I thought that overall, though, Alabama actually played very, very well. I I think this is the kind of game that if this game is on a neutral floor, Alabama wins this game by somewhere between 5 and 8 points, which is very good to know because Tennessee is right at that borderline 1 to 2 seed range, right? So if Alabama played well enough to win this game on a neutral floor by 5 to 8 points, you have to like where you're at, right? Can you be upset with what happened in the game and still like where you're at this point in the season? I think so, right? By all means, I'm very upset that this happened. I was in Mobile at Mardi Gras. I had my iPad watching the game. I was not going to miss any minute of it, and it felt like Alabama let this game slip out of their fingertips. And for multiple moments in this game, Alabama just had it in complete control. Alabama had a 9-point lead at one point, and it really felt like Alabama was going to run away with it. And Tennessee, to their credit, just kept clawing back. They had some guys that don't always hit three-point shots that were hitting shots. Jemai Mashak's a pretty good three-point shooter, not the best. Just doesn't take a lot. He does hit a big shot in this game. Dubar, not their best three-point shooter, hits 2 in this game. Ziegler, only a 30% three-point shooter, hits 2 in this game. Milicic hits 1 of 2, right? So you had some guys shooting well above their season averages. Lanier, Alabama actually did a pretty good job on. We held their best three-point shooter to just 25%, but overall, I thought that Alabama's game plan was pretty good. The issues where Alabama, had the problem was end of game scenarios, and then Alabama just did not convert at the free throw line or in layups. Alabama shot just 44% from 2 in this game. Obviously, as most people know, 99% of Alabama's shots from 2 are going to be from at the rim, and that is probably one of our season lows at the rim. Alabama has done a much better job at the rim than that this season, and you just have to execute better than that if you're going to beat a team like Tennessee. If you're going to beat a team as good as Tennessee, you have to execute when you get to where those shots are going to come from. And unfortunately, Alabama just didn't, right? So that causes Alabama to lose this game. That causes Alabama to now have to win either against Florida or Auburn or potentially both, but at least one of the next 2 to be able to be secured for a double bye in the SEC tournament, right? As of this current moment, Alabama is sitting at 12-4, tied with Florida, and just 1 game above Tennessee, sitting at 11-5. So again, if Alabama wins one of the next 2, then if Alabama beats Florida, then they would be guaranteed a double bye because they would hold the tiebreaker over Florida. If Alabama loses both of the next ones, we potentially would be playing on Thursday with Missouri having that tiebreaker over us, right? So there are some scenarios that could play out in which Alabama does not have the double bye on lock at this point. Auburn has fully won the conference, but there are some scenarios in which Alabama potentially loses the double bye if we do not win either the Florida game or the Auburn game. Florida being slightly more important due to the fact of the tiebreaker, obviously the Auburn game for bragging rights. So that's what I have to say about the Tennessee game. I know there's a lot of information about this game. I thought that this game was a fairly well-played game by Alabama. Obviously, the execution in key moments is something that's going to have to be talked about, and for good reason. I thought that Alabama needs to work on the things that we've talked about, but I think in general, something this team has done a pretty good job of is focusing on what they need to control and what's been causing them issues, right? We see turning over the ball being issues, and in this game, it was not, right? In some of the most recent games, Alabama has done a very good job not turning over the basketball. You saw Mark Sears almost, and I'm going to call it hero ball, but that's not exactly what I mean, but Mark Sears taking some shots that were maybe not as advised in the offense, and Nate Oates and co sit down and understand, hey, what's causing this is Mark Sears thinks he needs to get this shot for this reason or that reason. He's actually getting better shots when we have LeBaron Fallon or Aiden Holloway running point and Mark playing off ball a little bit. You have multiple creators, and it's working better. Mark has some of his best outputs of the entire season. He's playing better on both sides of the ball because he's also not having to do quite as much on the offensive end. Right, all of these things, it really feels like Nate Oates and company have done a good job adjusting to what has caused them issues at moments in this season. And so this is another one. Let's see what they've learned and get ready for the last home game of the season against Florida and what will be a very, very big showdown that's going to be happening on Wednesday night. So we will shift over to that Florida game, and then we will get out of here. As I mentioned, now we're going to talk about the Florida game. Alabama hosts Florida in what will be a very, very big top 5 matchup in Coleman Coliseum. Alabama currently sits at 7 in the AP poll. Auburn currently sits at 5th in the AP poll, with Tennessee jumping them, taking over that 4th spot. This is a game that if Alabama wants to try to be a 1 seed still is a must win. If you win this game, there is a chance that you still get the number 4 1 seed, potentially even number 3, depending upon how things shake out. If you lose this game, you are all but guaranteed to be a 2 seed. Granted, obviously Alabama made the NCAA tournament and made the Final Four last season as a 4 seed, so it is possible, but obviously the higher ranking that you can get, the better off and better chance you have to making a run in the NCAA tournament. The seeding just works out that way, that you get the lower ranked teams, the higher seed you are, right? This just makes sense. Also, potentially, if you get a 1 seed or a 2 seed, you may get a place closer for your fans to be able to travel, albeit Indianapolis instead of like in San Francisco, right? When you look at what some of the host sites are for this season. So that is just something to keep in mind. This game will determine whether Alabama even has an outside chance at a 1 seed still, or is it pretty much a 2 seed lock for the University of Alabama. So what do we need to talk about when we look at this game? First things first, Florida is a very good team on both ends of the basketball. They are a team that likes to play fast. This game will be up and down. This game will be lightning fast. Florida and Kentucky played earlier this season in Rupp. It was 106-100, right? I don't know that that's what we see out of this game. I think that Alabama and Florida are both better defensive teams than that. I think Alabama is going to pride themselves on their defense a little more than that. So I would not suspect this game to be both in the triple digits, but I would expect this game to be in the high 70 possession range, probably 76 or higher. Wouldn't shock me if we saw 77, 78 possessions. And I also would expect that this game is going to be higher scoring, right? These are some elite offenses that really execute at high levels. Even though these are good defenses they're going against, the offenses, in my opinion, are just that step above, that step better than the defenses. So I do expect that Alabama and Florida are both going to be able to score points on each other. Again, I do not expect to be quite as bad as that Florida-Kentucky game that happened earlier this season. So in my mind, I think this comes down to the guards. Right, it's the battle of the guards, the battle of the big guys. When you look at the battle of the guards, you're looking at Mark Sears versus Walter Clayton. You're looking at LeBaron Philon versus like an Elijah Martin. You're looking at like Will Richard. You're looking at some of these guys, and I think that from a 3-headed attack, I think that Florida is as good as anybody in the country. All 3 guys can shoot the 3. Clayton, Martin, and Richard all shooting over 36% from deep. They all take a lot of 3s, so this is a game in which all of our guards are going to have to play solid defense. They're going to have to be ready for this game. I would expect Alabama to go with a pretty guard-heavy lineup for large percentages of this game. Obviously, we've seen that a lot and has helped our offense when you're running multiple guards and going a little smaller, so to speak, with running an extra guard with Mark Sears. So I would suspect that's going to continue. I would not suspect any changes to the lineup this game. Another one is when you're looking at the big guys for Florida, right? Alex Condon has played absolutely phenomenally this year. Thomas Haw has played absolutely phenomenally this year. Chinulu has played absolutely incredibly this year. But they also bring back 7-1 Hen Logden that had the broken bone in the SEC tournament last season, right? He is coming back into the fold playing for them. In the Texas A&M game, he played 20 minutes, had 4 offensive rebounds and 4 defensive rebounds. So he's getting back into that role where he's able to play more and more and more. when you look at Alabama's game last season that Florida won, Logden had 6 rebounds, and Thomas Haw had 7. Condon had 7, right? Florida actually did a very, very good job on the glass against Alabama last season. The reason Alabama lost last season was more around the fact that they couldn't make a shot. And it really felt like for large stretches they couldn't defend, right? Florida has 105 points last season in Coleman. That's something I obviously expect that Nate Oates is going to be trying to clean up. But a lot of the people that played on last season's team are back for this season. Walter Clayton had 16 free throws last season. He's back for this team. Will Richard, again, 23 points. He's back. So some of the better contributors outside of like Tyrese Samuel, Zion Poland are back from last season's team. So, do keep that in mind when you're looking at Alabama and Florida this season. Is, most of the key players from Florida's side are back for this season. And especially when you're looking at a guy like Logden, the 7-1 center, that gives them some extra depth in the front court that they have not had at other times this season. I did think for earlier parts of this season that it kind of felt like Florida's strength was their front court. The injury to Condon, which it does feel like he's getting better and coming back from that injury pretty well. I know he came off the bench the last couple of games, but he has been very, very good on both sides of the basketball, right? I do think that Florida is a team that can play with Alabama, right? When I look at rosters, and there's some that I just don't think match up super well, I do not think Florida is one of those. I think Florida matches up actually incredibly well with Alabama. And it's one where I think Florida is a team that really feels like an Elite Eight, Final Four style team, much in the way that I look at Alabama. As when Alabama's playing the defense they're currently playing, I think Alabama's an Elite Eight, Final Four type of team. And when I look at that out of Florida, I think that this game is going to be incredibly, incredibly good. I think this is going to be really good basketball, and I think it's going to come down to whose guards can execute, which team can play better defense, which team can not get rattled by what the officials are doing or are not doing, which teams are just letting it roll off their back and just play with what they're capable of. I think that's what's going to determine this game, right? Alabama, I talked about how Alabama was able to out-rebound Texas A&M in offensive rebounds, even though they were such an elite team. Florida is just one under them in offensive rebounds. They held their own, and they actually out-defensive rebounded A&M. Right? Florida's number 8 in rebounds this season. They have not done as good of a job getting to the free throw line on offense. They've done a pretty good job keeping teams off the free throw line on defense. They've done a pretty good job keeping teams off the three-point line, keeping teams out of the assists department, right? So, again, all of these things added up. I think that this Florida team is a very good matchup for Alabama. I think this is a team that matches up very well. And I really look at this game as a pick'em, right? I look at this game as who comes out and gets the better start, right? Which scares me, honestly, right? When I'm looking at Alabama, if I was picking this game 2 weeks ago, I picked Florida. I'm not going to say to run away with it, but I really pick Florida. And I feel confident in that pick. Because of the resurgence of Alabama's defense in the last few games, because of how Alabama has played and fought with some of these better teams and really feels like they have something to prove, and it doesn't feel like they're just going through the motions, because at moments last season it really felt like we were going through the motions, and until the NCAA tournament, you never knew that Alabama had the defense in them, right? You thought they did, but you never saw it. But you never, because you had not seen it, it was hard to predict. However, over the past, let's call it 7-8 quarters, or 8 halves, I've really felt like Alabama has played solid basketball, right? I thought that Alabama has started the game much better outside of that start to that Kentucky game, right? Since the start of that Kentucky game, I think that Alabama has played much better defense. I think that Alabama has started games better. Alabama has played with the intensity that you need to play with. Alabama is being more locked into the scouting report. I think part of that's because Nate Oates has been pulling players that are not locked into the scouting report, right? But I do think that there's a lot of reasons to be positive about this team currently, right? Which has me feeling like, because Alabama is in a must-win spot, part of me is leaning towards picking Alabama. This is a home game. This is a game in which this is going to be Mark Sears' last game in Coleman Coliseum. I think there's a lot of reasons why I would say that Alabama may win this game. As I said, all of those being considered, if I picked this game 2 weeks ago, I was absolutely picking Florida. And I think now, because of what Alabama has shown me, and again, I know 2 of those are wins. One of those was a loss. We're coming off that loss against we're coming off that loss against Mississippi State. But again, what I saw in that Kentucky game, what I saw in that Mississippi State game, what I saw in the Tennessee game, all really give me some pretty positive outlooks on what this game is going to look like. And I think that Alabama's defense and Alabama wants to be able to prove, hey, we can play with some of the big guys from a defensive perspective, right? Everyone knew Alabama's offense was elite, and Alabama's offense could play with anyone in the country. But I think Alabama's wanted to prove, hey, we can play defense with some of the best against some of the better offenses. And I think this is the first chance that Alabama is going to have against a truly elite offense since they were kind of embarrassed at Missouri, and we keep talking about that embarrassment at Missouri. Obviously, the reason Alabama lost against Tennessee was not their defense. There were a few key game scenarios that they just were not successful in. But I think that Alabama is going to want to prove what they can do on defense against Florida. And inevitably, I do think Alabama wins this game. But I would expect this game to be very close. I would expect this game to feel like it's an Elite Eight Final Four game. I would not be shocked if we saw this game again in the Elite Eight or the Final Four. These teams are that good, and I would expect that much out of these teams, right? So I'm looking at this game somewhere in the neighborhood of 91-88. A higher scoring game for sure. And it could be a little higher than that, depending upon what the defensive execution looks like. But I think that both teams are going to be playing as well on defense as humanly possible. So I think part of me is going to think that, at times defense is going to win out, at times offense is going to win out. And that's going to be, like I said, somewhere 91-88. That 3 to 4 point margin is what I would expect in this game. I would expect this game to come down to the wire. I would expect that Mark Sears to try to get to the free throw line as much as humanly possible. I would expect, for Alabama to play its game and to, again, try to prove that they are able to play defense against one of the better offenses in the country and is also able to play offense against one of the better defenses in the country. So that's what I have to say. Like I said, I am predicting Alabama to win. I am not super confident in this one at all. I think that this game is very close to a pick 'em. I'm really basing this off what I've seen the last few quarters out of Alabama, few halves out of Alabama. I've been very happy with what I've seen, and so I am going to predict that Alabama wins this game, but it is really, really close, and it would not shock me if Florida is able to win this one. But as we've said, this game is hugely important for Alabama and their seeding in the SEC as well as NCAA tournaments. So we will see what happens. Again, I will be in attendance for this game that's going to be happening on Wednesday evening. I will record an episode that's going to come out. I actually may record late Wednesday evening and have an episode come out breaking this game down on Thursday, as I have something I need to deal with in the family. So I am going to try to put that episode out on Thursday to break down the Auburn game. So if you are interested in that, subscribe to the channel. That's going to come out. As always, the thread will come out to break down the Florida players in more specific detail. If you are interested in any of that, subscribe to my Twitter, subscribe here to the YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.